Good morning. We're at day 32, and we are reading John 16, verses 16 through 33. The disciples' heads must be spinning at this point. Jesus' betrayal is just hours away, followed by his crucifixion. Jesus was leaving them, but they would see him again. What does this even mean? They were confused and troubled. As we'll read in the next few chapters, that interval between Jesus' death and resurrection would find the disciples questioning everything until their faith was renewed upon seeing him again with earthly eyes after the resurrection. In our faith journey, there will be mountaintop experiences where we feel intimately connected with God, surrounded by the Father's love, and find ourselves walking in the fruits of the Spirit. During those times, the nearness of God is tangible. There's a connectedness with God that is so real. Those are incredible times. But like any relationship, there are highs and lows. There are times when we feel distant from God or as if he has left us. We don't sense his presence or hear his voice as loudly as we once did. It's almost as if he's no longer with us. The disciples were about to experience this in a very real way over the next 3 days. These times are called the dark night of the soul. The phrase comes from a 16th century Carmelite monk named John of the Cross. The dark night of the soul, as he describes it, is not simply the experience of suffering. It is suffering in what it feels like the silence of God. He wrote of how God works to change us, not just through joy and light, but through confusion, times of disappointment and loss. In times when it feels like everything has been stripped away, when our prayers feel like they only reach as high as the ceiling, and where spiritual practices like Bible reading and worship that once gave life feel cold. So what does one do during these difficult trials, these dark nights of the soul? We wait. We remember what we know to be true, whether our heart feels it or not. We ask people to pray for and with us. We read the Psalms and we cling to God's promises, that whether we feel him or not, his love, his care, his comfort, and his presence will never leave us or forsake us. Jesus knows the disciples' confusion, and he continues speaking with them to bring clarity. He tells the disciples and us that there will be in our lives times for weeping and lament, but the time of rejoicing will follow. Sorrow is for a night, but joy comes in the morning. He compares the sorrow-joy experience to that of childbirth. There is a going through. There is a painful and agonizing time that feels like it will never end, but will give birth to a joy incomprehensible, lasting, in which no one can take away from us. Jesus goes on to speak with more clarity about that joy. It's not only a joy at his resurrection, but a joy that comes from knowing the deep love of the Father that he has for the disciples, that he has for us. Commentary writer William Barclay says, here Jesus is saying, you can go to God because he loves you. And Jesus is saying this before the cross. He did not die to change God into love. He died to tell us that God is love. He came not because God so hated the world, but because he so loved the world. Jesus brought men and women to the love of God the Father. In a moment, Jesus would be praying for his disciples, but before he did so, he summarized these last words and instructions and preparations that we've been reading about in these last 2 chapters. He says, I have spoken these things that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Knowing that Jesus has overcome the world lifts our heart, encourages our heart. It is the foundation for our peace in him. In it, we see that Jesus is in control. We see that although he leaves, he does not abandon. We see that he loves, and we see that the victory is his. We can take heart and be encouraged indeed. Brothers and sisters, I don't know where you are right now. If you're on that mountaintop experience right now with your journey with the Lord, that is wonderful. And I encourage you to pray for those who are in the dark night of the soul. If you find yourself feeling like you're in between the crucifixion and the resurrection, take heart. He has overcome the world. There is a joy that is coming. Cling to his promises, read the Psalms, and allow your heart and your soul to be renewed in Jesus. Amen. Tomorrow we begin chapter 17, verses 1 through 26, where Jesus prays for his disciples and for us. Have a great day.